Fluency is not about speaking fast. Speed is sometimes just a mask for confusion, a way learners try to cover their fear with a stream of continuous sounds. Speaking quickly but leaving others unable to understand you, or feeling that you yourself are not truly connected, is not fluency. It is nothing more than meaningless haste. Fluency is also not about pronouncing every syllable perfectly or mastering grammar so flawlessly that not a single mistake is made. Learners are often haunted by the idea that even one small error makes them a failure. But in reality, native speakers make mistakes every single day. They speak half-finished sentences, change direction midway, fill gaps with words like, well, you know, and no one considers them less fluent because of that. Fluency does not lie in mechanical accuracy, but in the ability to keep your natural train of thought alive, to fully express your emotions without cutting off your own flow. The essence of fluency is a state of mind, emotion, identity, and inner flow. When you speak in your native tongue, you don't think about rules. You don't check subjects, predicates, or verb tenses. You simply let emotions guide your words. Words burst out in rhythm with your heartbeat, in reaction, in the moment. That is fluency, naturalness, wholeness, and an unbroken flow. What holds learners back is not language knowledge, but fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of being laughed at, fear of being judged. From that fear, an invisible wall is built in the mind. Every time you want to speak, you pause to reconsider, to correct, to calculate. And the very moment you hesitate, the flow is broken. Fluency vanishes not because of lacking vocabulary, but because you are trapped in the cycle of self-criticism. Look at how children learn to speak. They babble, they make mistakes, their pronunciation is distorted, their word choice imperfect, yet they keep going. They don't stop, and adults still understand them. This is why their language ability develops so fast that adults are astonished. Adults, on the other hand, when learning a new language, instead of bravely trying and failing, retreat into safety, afraid of embarrassment, afraid of exposing weakness, and that false sense of safety kills fluency at its very birth. Fluency cannot be built on perfectionism. It can only be formed through naturalness and authenticity. When you let go, when you dare to let your speech be alive, sometimes stumbling, sometimes slowing down, but always moving forward, only then do you step into true fluency. Listeners do not need you to be perfect. They need you to be genuine, clear, and full of emotion. Remember, language is a tool to connect, not a weapon to show off. If your focus is only on impressing others with complex vocabulary or flawless grammar, you have turned the conversation into a performance. And when you perform, you lose truth, you lose connection. Fluency does not lie in impression, but in connection. People remember how you made them feel, not whether you used the past continuous tense correctly. That is why fluency is identity. It reflects who you are in the moment of communication. When you speak and still keep your own tone, when you use English but do not lose your true self, then you have achieved fluency. That is when language becomes an extension of yourself, not a mask you put on. The natural flow of fluency does not come overnight. It comes from the moments you dare to speak even when unsure. You dare to try even when incomplete. You dare to let your voice be heard even when trembling. Each time you overcome hesitation, you expand that flow. Fluency is not a destination, but a state you choose to live in moment by moment. When you begin to see fluency through this lens, the pressure immediately drops. You no longer ask, "Am I speaking correctly?" But instead, "Am I conveying my meaning and my feelings?" The second question frees you from the straitjacket of grammar and opens the door to confidence. You are no longer a learner trying to pass a test, but a communicator, present and alive, expressing yourself fully. Imagine sitting in front of a close friend. You tell them about a memory, a joy, a sorrow. In that moment, you don't weigh every punctuation mark. You just tell. You laugh, you pause, you emphasize, you gesture. All of that creates connection. That is fluency. And that is what you must bring into English. Not perfection, but aliveness. From now on, redefine fluency for yourself. Not speed, not grammar, not an endless vocabulary list. Fluency is the emotion you transmit, the identity you express, the natural flow you refuse to strangle with fear. When you understand this, the path becomes much shorter. You don't need to wait until your pronunciation is perfect to speak. You don't need to learn 1,000 more words before feeling confident in conversation. You only need to dare to let English become your natural channel of connection, to let it flow like water, sometimes rough, sometimes stumbling, but always continuing, because fluency is not perfection in the eyes of others. Fluency is freedom within your own mind. Schools have produced a generation of English learners who study not to communicate, but to pass exams. Tests are seen as the only measure of competence, and every teaching method revolves around that goal. Students are required to memorize long lists of hundreds of vocabulary words. They bury themselves in dry grammar exercises, analyzing past, present, and future tenses as if solving math problems. They practice writing essays based on rigid, formulaic sentence structures, far removed from real-life situations. As a result, on paper, they may score high. But when stepping into real life, faced with an actual conversation, their brains instantly freeze. The knowledge they once memorized from books does not appear in time. They know the meaning of words but cannot use them. They know the rules but cannot speak them. Silence replaces confidence, and a language that should have been a bridge for connection instead becomes a wall of separation. The greatest mistake of this system lies here. It teaches language as a dead subject instead of a living skill. Language was never born for exams. It was born so people could understand one another, share emotions, and convey ideas. But test-based learning has severed that essence. Learners become accustomed to analyzing sentences instead of feeling rhythm, accustomed to choosing A, B, C, or D instead of looking into someone's eyes and conversing. For years, people were led by the false belief that high scores equal English proficiency, but if communication skills do not exist, scores are only a mask. They hide the real fear inside. Fear of speaking, fear of being wrong, fear of being laughed at, and when fear becomes a reflex, opportunities for communication are lost. Learners think they are weak, but in truth, it is the teaching method that has tied their hands. You can see this clearly when someone has just left school. They may read English newspapers and understand them, but when asked a simple question like, "Tell me about yourself," they hesitate, stammer, unsure where to begin. That is not because they lack knowledge. It is because they have been trained to analyze, not to respond. A grammar exercise may ask them to find errors in a sentence. They can do it correctly, but in real conversation, they scramble to check every rule in their head. That controlling loop makes them lose pace. Language is no longer a flow, but a series of calculations, and once you turn speech into formulas, you strip it of life. On top of that, judgment in the educational environment makes things worse. A misspelling is marked in red, a wrong sentence loses points, a test is scored lower just because an article is missing. The underlying message is sent: mistakes are unacceptable. From then on, learners grow up believing that only when perfect do they have the right to speak. And when they cannot reach that perfection, they choose silence. Silence in class, silence in life, and silence even in their dreams of using English to expand their world. But the truth is, no one can be fluent without making mistakes. Even native speakers make mistakes every day. Mistakes are not failures, but proof that you are learning, trying, and progressing. However, the exam system does not allow mistakes to be seen this way. It turns mistakes into stains. It plants seeds of shame. And when shame accumulates, confidence is suffocated. That is why it is no surprise that many people spend a decade learning English and still cannot speak. They do not lack knowledge. They lack freedom in their minds. They were never taught that language is for living, for breathing, for laughing, for telling a story. They were only taught that language is for exams, for scores, for proving something to others. To break this barrier, a redefinition is needed. English is no longer a subject, it is a skill. It is like learning to swim. You can read hundreds of books about swimming, but if you never jump into the water, you will never know how to swim. English is the same. You can do thousands of grammar exercises, but if you never open your mouth to speak, you will always be frozen. The change begins with mindset. Stop seeing grades as the ultimate goal. Instead, see every conversation as the real exam. The exam here is not to classify you, but to let you experience the language. When you dare to make mistakes, when you dare to try, that is when you truly learn. And it is at that very moment that fluency begins to form. The world out there does not care whether you use the past perfect or the present continuous. The world only cares whether you can say what you mean. If you can share an idea, transmit an emotion, connect with another person, you are fluent. Small mistakes will fix themselves over time, but silence will never turn into fluency. The mistake of the education system is teaching you to set the wrong goal. but you do not have to keep following that path. From today, you can choose another. Learn to live, learn to speak, learn to connect, because language is not a prison wall, but a bridge to a wider world. And that bridge can only be built when you walk on it with words, not with exams. What prevents you from speaking English fluently is not a lack of vocabulary, nor the complexity of grammar. What truly holds you back is an invisible wall built inside your mind, a wall made of fear, shame, and perfectionism. It does not ring loudly like an alarm bell. It does not appear clearly like a prohibition sign. It whispers hidden deep and only emerges when you are about to open your mouth. That wall begins forming from experiences that may seem small. Perhaps it was the time you mispronounced a word and your friends laughed. Perhaps it was the moment a teacher corrected your mistake in front of the entire class. Perhaps it was just a puzzled look from someone that made you think you had just made a fool of yourself. Those fragments of memory accumulate, repeat themselves, and gradually form a belief, I'm not good enough to speak. From that belief, a new habit is born, silence for safety. The fear of mistakes is the first brick. You fear speaking incorrectly and being judged, yet in reality, mistakes are the only path to progress. Native speakers also stumble, repeat words, hesitate, but they do not stop. You, however, react differently. A single slip makes you shrink, withdraw, and choose silence. Each time that happens, the wall grows thicker. Next comes shame. Shame about imperfect pronunciation. Shame about speaking slowly. Shame about not finding the right word. That feeling is like a distorted mirror reflecting your image, making you believe others see only your weaknesses. But the truth is, most listeners do not care about small mistakes. They care about the message, about the emotion you convey. It is your self-created shame that robs you of the chance to connect. Then comes perfectionism, the most dangerous enemy. You want every sentence to be absolutely correct. You want every sound to be precise. You want your speech flawless. But perfectionism makes you slow and unnatural. While you are busy checking every word in your head, you lose the moment of communication. And when the moment passes, all you are left with is regret and a sense of failure. Fear, shame, and perfectionism merge into a spiral of self-destruction. The more silent you remain, the greater the anxiety grows. The more you avoid, the smaller your confidence becomes. Eventually, you believe you are incapable of fluency. But the problem is not ability. It lies in the psychological wall you unconsciously built yourself. To dismantle this wall, you must first recognize it. Notice the moment your heart beats faster before speaking, the moment you mean to speak but swallow your words, the moment you hear that inner voice whisper, don't say it, you'll be wrong. That is the wall. Only when you call it by its name can you begin to remove its bricks. The way to dismantle it is not to strive for more perfection, but to accept imperfection. Allow yourself to speak with mistakes. See every stumble as a step forward. For every wrong sentence you speak is worth 1,000 times more than silence. Mistakes are fuel for fluency, while silence is only a dark cellar that keeps you trapped in place. Remember when you learned to walk. You didn't wait until you could walk perfectly to try. You fell, you stood up, you took a few steps, you fell again. And it was precisely that persistence that carried you to where you are today. Learning to speak English is the same. How many times you fall doesn't matter. What matters is whether you dare to keep moving forward. Do not measure yourself by other people's eyes. They may hear you make mistakes, they may laugh, but they do not live your life. Only you know how important English is for your dreams and opportunities. Do not let a small mocking smile steal the chances you deserve. The invisible wall will not collapse in a single day. It demands patience and continuous courage. Each time you choose to speak instead of staying silent, a brick falls away. Each time you accept a mistake instead of feeling ashamed, a crack appears. Each time you let go of perfectionism to focus on connection, the wall grows lower. One day, you will step across and realize, fluency was never as far away as you thought. Language is the rhythm of humanity. It needs vitality, not cold precision. People will not remember whether your pronunciation was perfect. They will remember the sparkle in your eyes when you told a story, the enthusiasm in your voice, the authenticity you brought. And all of that comes only when you dare to break down the invisible wall. So from today, stop letting fear, shame, and perfectionism imprison you. See fluency not as perfection, but as freedom. Freedom to say what you want, in the way you can, with the sincerity of who you are. Then you will realize the greatest barrier was never the language itself, but the mind. And when the mind is liberated, fluency will flow naturally like breath. Perfectionism is the most subtle chain that imprisons fluency. You think you are doing the right thing by trying to speak with precision and correctness, but in reality, the obsession with word-for-word accuracy turns language into a contest of form. Instead of communicating, you step into a performance. Instead of connecting, you turn yourself into an error-checking machine, and in that moment, fluency disappears. Observe how native speakers converse. They are not perfect word for word, as you might imagine. They speak hastily, repeat words, change their minds midway, even leave sentences unfinished. Yet it all feels natural, because they maintain rhythm and ease. What makes them perceived as fluent is not absolute accuracy, but confidence and continuity in the flow of communication. Language learners often take the opposite direction. Instead of focusing on rhythm, they get stuck in grammar, vocabulary, and the obsession with perfect pronunciation. Every time they want to speak, the brain instantly runs a checklist. Is this tense correct? Is subject and predicate aligned? Is the word choice exact? And it is precisely this checking that creates pauses, killing naturalness. Perfectionism seems like motivation, but in truth it is a barrier. It stops you from trying when you are unsure, stops you from speaking when you are not ready. And in language, not ready can last forever, because you will never reach the imagined perfection you seek. The truth is, no one achieves word-for-word accuracy. Even famous writers and speakers occasionally hesitate, make mistakes, or revise their ideas midway. What you need is not perfectionism, but naturalness. Naturalness does not mean carelessness. It is the ability to sustain continuous flow, to keep speech rhythmic and alive despite small errors. Instead of stopping to correct every detail, you allow yourself to go on, keeping the focus always on message and emotion. Never forget that communication is about the listener, not just about you. The person opposite wants to understand and feel you, not grade you. If you make them feel engaged and connected, they will not care about a grammar slip or an imperfect sound. On the contrary, if you speak with perfect accuracy but stiffness, without emotion, the listener will leave the conversation without any impression. To break the obsession with perfectionism, you must change the standard by which you judge yourself. The standard is no longer, did I make mistakes, but did I maintain the flow? When you put rhythm first, you begin to focus on continuity instead of accuracy. And it is this continuity that is the true essence of fluency. A simple technique is to accept mistakes as a natural part of communication. When you mispronounce or use the wrong word, don't stop too long to blame yourself. Continue the conversation. Native speakers do this every day. They correct themselves while speaking or skip over mistakes altogether, and the conversation continues naturally. Fluency is not the absence of mistakes, but the ability to go on despite them. Try practicing by setting a boundary for yourself. For the next 5 minutes, I will speak without self-correcting. You will notice something interesting. The conversation becomes more lively, you feel less tense, and the flow of communication remains intact. It is precisely in those moments of letting go of perfectionism that you touch true fluency. Also remember that language has its own musicality. Fluency is not a string of correct words, but a flow of sound carrying rhythm, emotion, and natural rise and fall. When speaking English, pay attention to your breathing, your intonation, your pauses. These are what create appeal. You may make grammar mistakes, but if rhythm and emotion flow smoothly, listeners will still perceive you as fluent. Perfectionism is a silent enemy because it makes you forget the true purpose of language. Language is not a competition, not a test. It is a bridge for stepping into others' worlds, for sharing, for connecting. When you are obsessed with crafting perfect sentences, you cut off that connection. And when you focus on naturalness, you realize you are truly communicating. Letting go of the obsession with word-for-word accuracy does not mean neglecting grammar or pronunciation. It means placing them in their rightful place, as tools, not as goals. Use them to support you, not to control you. You learn grammar to build structure, pronunciation to be understood, but you use them as foundations, not shackles. Fluency is when you dare to step out of perfectionism and embrace the truth that language is alive, flexible, and sometimes messy. It is beautiful precisely because of that imperfection. People will not remember you for following every rule, but because you let your words carry vitality, sincerity, and natural rhythm. From today, break the chains of perfectionism. Let your words carry breath, emotion, and continuity. See mistakes as seasoning, naturalness as foundation, and fluency as a journey that is never perfect but always alive. Only then will English cease to be a burden and become a natural flow that reflects who you truly are. Many English learners set their ultimate goal as speaking like a native speaker. They believe that is the true measure of fluency, the highest standard everyone must pursue. But this very mindset leads them astray. By constantly trying to imitate the tone, accent, and even the communication style of others, they gradually lose their true identity. And the paradox is, the more they try to sound like someone else, the less natural they become. Language is a tool for expressing your authentic self. It was never meant to turn you into someone's copy. When you learn English, you don't need to erase your culture, your voice, or your personality. You only need to find a way to let those qualities shine clearly and vividly through a new language. The goal is not to become a native speaker, but to become a genuine communicator with your own unique voice. Imagine this. Someone speaks English with a Vietnamese, French, Indian, or Japanese accent, but tells their story with enthusiasm, sparkling eyes, and a voice full of emotion. Listeners are still captivated. They do not care about the accent. They care about the energy, the sincerity, and the message. What people remember is not how accurate your pronunciation was, but how powerfully you conveyed emotion. In reality, even within the world of native speakers, there is no single standard accent. Americans, British, Australians, Canadians, all have different ways of speaking. Even within the same country, each region has its own accent. If a native standard truly existed, which one would it be? This question itself shows that chasing the native ideal is meaningless. What you should aim for is not to be like anyone else, but to be alive and expressive as yourself. What does alive mean? It means you can use English to express joy when sharing a success. It means you can show anger, sadness, or excitement without being trapped in awkwardness. It means you can bring your personality, your humor, your depth into your words, instead of just piecing together mechanical structures. Aliveness comes from letting language serve emotion, not the other way around. Someone may speak English smoothly, but without soul. That is not fluency. On the other hand, someone may still have an accent, may hesitate at times, but dares to put their true self into their story, dares to let their speech carry personal color. This person is seen as fluent. Because fluency is connection, not performance. This also carries deep psychological meaning. When you set the goal of speaking like a native speaker, you implicitly place yourself below them while they are above. You see yourself as the one behind, always chasing. Such thinking breeds inferiority, and that very inferiority makes it harder to open your mouth. But when you change your goal to speaking as myself, you immediately reclaim ownership. You stop comparing, stop trying to prove yourself. You only need to be present with your real voice, your real energy, and that is where the power lies. A clear proof of this can be found in international speakers. Some speak English with very heavy accents, yet the audience still stands up to applaud. Why? Because they speak from the heart, with confidence, with a vitality that cannot be imitated. Listeners are not convinced by perfection. They are convinced by truth. To achieve this, you must practice an important skill, speaking English the way you naturally speak in your native language. Keep your own pauses for emphasis, your personal humor, your natural facial and body expressions. Do not polish yourself to the point of becoming a robot speaking English. When you preserve your own qualities, listeners feel clearly that they are facing a real, vibrant human being, not a machine. The truth is, the goal of speaking like a native speaker has never been achievable for a late learner, but the goal of speaking as yourself in English is something anyone can reach. And that is the path that truly leads you to freedom. Freedom to converse, to tell stories, to express yourself without being bound by a distant ideal. Once you embrace this goal, the burden instantly disappears. You no longer worry whether your accent is bad, whether someone thinks less of you. Instead, you focus on one thing. How can others understand me, feel me, connect with me? And that is the true essence of fluency. Remember, English is not the exclusive property of native speakers. It is the shared property of the entire world. Everyone who uses it brings in a piece of culture, a voice, a unique personality. It is this diversity that makes English a global language, and you, with your own voice, are part of that. Your true goal is not to become someone else, but to use English to open doors for yourself, so that when you tell a story, others see the vitality in your eyes. So that when you share an idea, others feel the passion in your voice. So that when you speak of sadness, others fall silent because they truly touch that emotion. Fluency does not lie in imitation. Fluency lies in ownership, owning your voice, your emotions, your personality in a new language. And when you are alive as yourself, you no longer need to compare with any standard. You have already reached the highest goal, to be yourself, freely, in any language. Grammar is often turned into a shackle weighing heavily on the learner's mind. Every time they prepare to speak, they immediately pull out a mental checklist. Is this tense correct? Is the verb conjugated accurately? Is there a missing article? And it is precisely these rounds of checking that block their speech. What kills fluency is not grammar itself, but the fear of grammar. If you look directly at its essence, grammar is only the skeleton. It creates structure. It gives language shape, but it is not the soul of communication. A skeleton can be anatomically perfect, but if it lacks blood, breath, and emotion, it is still just a dry corpse. Communication needs life, and that life comes from voice, rhythm, and natural expression. What confuses many learners is that education has placed grammar on a throne. They are taught that even a small verb tense mistake can ruin a whole sentence. They grow accustomed to being marked in red, graded, and judged simply for missing an article. Those experiences plant in the subconscious a belief, if it isn't 100% correct, I'm not allowed to speak. And this belief is the biggest barrier on the journey to fluency. In reality, even native speakers do not follow grammar perfectly. They shorten words, skip structures, mix tenses, begin a sentence, and then switch directions. Yet no one considers these serious errors. Because in real life, the goal of language is not to score a perfect grade, but to deliver meaning. The listener needs to understand you, feel you, not receive a grammatical analysis after every sentence. A shift in perspective is needed. Grammar is not the enemy, it is only a tool. Tools are meant to serve, not to dominate. You learn grammar to have a foundation, to avoid losing direction, but you do not need to turn yourself into a walking grammar machine. Use it like a frame to build a house, but let the colors, the light, and the warmth come from how you speak, how you connect. A natural conversation is always full of imperfections. A person might forget the plural S, use the present tense instead of the past, but if the flow of communication remains intact and the listener understands, the conversation is still successful. The death of fluency does not come from small mistakes, but from the moment you stay silent out of fear of mistakes. You must reset the focus. Instead of asking, did I say it correctly? Ask, did the other person understand me? Instead of obsessing over, was this grammar correct? Focus on, was this message clear? The new question opens the door to freedom, while the old question drags you back into chains. One useful method is to practice speaking with permission to make mistakes. Set a rule for yourself, finish your thought, even if it's wrong, and don't stop to self-correct. At first, you will feel uncomfortable because your brain is addicted to perfectionism. But gradually you will realize the listener still understands, the conversation still flows, and the anxiety fades away. At that moment, grammar has returned to its rightful place as a supportive frame, not a barrier. Look at how children learn to speak. They do not begin with grammar. They begin with sounds, with emotions, with the desire to be understood. Grammar comes later as a natural part of repetition. And as they grow, they can speak fluently without ever thinking of formulas. The lesson here is fluency always comes before grammatical perfection. More important than anything is recognizing the danger of the fear of grammar. That fear makes you self-censor, turns every sentence into an exam, and robs you of the joy of communication. When you let go of that fear, not only do you speak more fluently, but language also becomes alive, approachable, like a flowing stream instead of a test. No one in real life demands you score 100%. People only want to feel that you are present, speaking sincerely. A sentence with mistakes but spoken with confidence is far stronger than a correct sentence choked back into silence. What lingers in others' memory is not structure, but the energy you transmit. From here, remind yourself, grammar is the backbone, but life comes from you. Learn it, but do not fear it. Let it support you, not imprison you. Every time you open your mouth, do not prioritize perfect accuracy, but prioritize continuity, clarity, naturalness. When you do this, you will feel your voice released, fluency will begin to appear, and English will no longer be an obsession, but truly become a bridge for you to connect with the world. In classrooms, language is often presented as a perfect system. Sentences must have subjects and predicates, subordinate clauses neatly arranged, semicolons placed in the right spots. But in real life, communication never works that way. A conversation is not an essay. It is an organic entity, constantly shifting, bending, expanding, and contracting with emotions and context. Native speakers themselves do not follow textbook structures when talking. They leave sentences unfinished, insert fillers, change ideas midway, even make grammar mistakes. Yet no one considers them less fluent, because fluency is measured by the ability to sustain a natural flow, not by absolute correctness. Real language is a river, not a block of concrete. The beauty of communication lies in flexibility. When you speak, your tone may rise with excitement, fall with reflection, slow down with hesitation, or burst with emotion. All of these create color in your words. Listeners are drawn in precisely because of this variation, because it is genuine and gives the sense that you are alive in every word. If communication is locked into rigid frames, it loses its vibrancy and becomes a memorized recitation. What many language learners fail to understand is communication does not need perfection, it needs connection. A clumsy but sincere sentence is still stronger than a polished but hollow one. Listeners will remember your eyes, your tone, your sincerity in every word you utter, far more than whether you used the present perfect continuous correctly. Picture a real-life conversation. You share a happy memory. You may laugh intermittently, repeat certain words, add fillers like, you know. None of these messy details reduce fluency. In fact, they make your story feel more authentic. It is imperfection that creates closeness, because that is how humans truly communicate. When you focus too much on being correct, you unintentionally turn the conversation into a presentation. The listener may understand you, but they won't feel connected. They listen with logic, but they do not touch emotion. Organic communication is different. It invites, it opens space for empathy. It allows you and the other person to breathe together in the dialogue. To achieve this, you must learn to let go. Let go of the intention to control every word. Let go of the worry about perfect pronunciation. Let go of the obsession with how others might judge you. Instead, focus on the feeling of the moment. What do you want to share? What do you want the listener to feel? When you do, the words will naturally come to you. An organic conversation also shows flexibility. You may begin speaking in one direction, then realize there's a better way to say it, and change course mid-sentence. Native speakers do this every day, and they consider it normal. You have the right to do the same. Do not fear being illogical. Communication is not a thesis. It only needs rhythm and connection. The messiness of language is also proof of truth. Humans are not machines. We think, feel, react, and all of it blends together when words come out. That is why a conversation full of energy and emotion often has a certain untidiness. But it is a valuable untidiness because it shows you are present and sincere. Learners must build the habit of embracing this imperfection. Do not try to polish yourself into a cold, mechanical version. Allow yourself to laugh when joyful, hesitate when nervous, stumble when overly excited. That is the sign you are using language as a living organism, not as a soulless tool. In fact, it is precisely the organic nature of communication that makes you appealing in the eyes of others. Listeners will not remember whether you were accurate down to every detail, but they will remember the energy in your voice, the passion in your eyes, and the feeling you gave them. That matters more than any rule. Language is alive when it breathes with you. It needs flexibility, emotion, and even a little messiness. Do not see those things as flaws. See them as signs you are entering the real world of fluency, where speech is no longer an exercise, but breath itself, the natural flow of who you are. And only then will you truly feel the power of communication. Many people believe that only when they are good enough can they speak. But the truth is the opposite. Only when you dare to speak do you become good. Fluency is not a reward for patient silence, but the result of the times you dared to open your mouth, dared to stumble, dared to let your trembling voice be heard in conversation. Confidence always comes before fluency. If you wait until you are perfect to begin, you will never begin. What keeps learners stuck is not a lack of vocabulary or grammar, but the mindset of not enough. They think, I'm not good enough to speak. I need to study a little more. I'll start when I'm really ready. But that readiness never comes, because language does not operate on theory. It only develops through action. The more silent you are, the more you reinforce the belief that you are not ready, and that belief becomes a chain. Look at how children learn a language. They never wait until they master grammar to start speaking. They make mistakes, they leave words out, they stumble, and precisely because of that, they become more fluent every day. Adults are different. We fear mistakes, fear being judged, fear being laughed at. That very fear keeps us silent, and silence never produces fluency. Confidence does not mean being fearless. It means daring to act while fear is still there. Every time you speak, even if the sentence is incomplete, you are sending a signal to your brain, I have the right to speak. That signal accumulates, becomes a habit, and eventually becomes instinct. That is when fluency truly appears. It is important to understand, no one remembers your mistakes as much as you do. The listener usually only cares about what you want to share. If you speak with sincerity, they will listen. If you dare to express yourself, they will respect you. Only you, trapped in perfectionism, turn mistakes into stains. The truth is, most listeners even admire that you dare to speak in a second language, something they themselves may never attempt. Confidence also brings a powerful psychological effect. It creates a positive loop. You speak, you are understood, you feel capable. That feeling makes you want to speak more. And the more you speak, the better your skill becomes. It is a self-reinforcing process, a cycle of action, result, motivation through which fluency grows. Without the first step of confidence, that loop will never begin. It is also important to distinguish between confidence and recklessness. Confidence is not speaking carelessly, without regard for the listener. It is the courage to enter a conversation with the mindset, I may not be perfect, but I have value to share. That very attitude creates respect. People do not expect you to be a dictionary. They only need you to show up with your real voice. A practical way to build confidence is to create a safe environment for practice. You can start with a mirror, with a voice recording on your phone, or with a practice partner. The important thing is to build the habit of producing sound, hearing your own voice, and accepting the initial clumsiness. When you become familiar with your own voice, you will fear less when others hear it. Also, set small, achievable goals. Don't aim to give an hour-long presentation in English right away. Start with a greeting, a question, a short comment. Each small victory is a brick in the foundation of confidence. And once that foundation is strong enough, you can move on to longer and more complex conversations. What you must remember is this. Fluency is not a sudden explosion, but the result of hundreds, thousands of imperfect utterances. Each small piece builds the larger picture. Confidence is the hand that lays the very first piece. Without it, the picture will remain unfinished forever. Language only lives when you give it the chance to breathe through your own voice. Books, exercises, listening, and reading are all important, but they are only preparation. Real communication happens only when you speak, and only that action can free you from the chains of fear and bring you to fluency. So, step out of silence, even if your voice shakes, even if your sentence is incomplete. Speak. Every time you dare to speak, you are moving one step closer to fluency. No one becomes fluent by waiting. Fluency does not come after silence. It blossoms from your voice, imperfect but honest, not yet strong but determined. And one day, when you look back, you will realize it was those trembling moments when you first spoke, not the hours of memorization, that marked the beginning of your journey to mastering a language. Fluency is not the final destination, but the reward for courage, starting today. Fluency does not come from short bursts of effort. It is built through steady repetition, through moments when you persist in speaking a little each day. The habit of practicing for just 5 minutes may seem small, but it has more power than hours of cramming followed by neglect. Language learners often carry the mindset of waiting for the ideal moment. They think they need a free hour, a quiet environment, or the perfect partner to practice speaking. But the truth is, by the time those ideal conditions arrive, the opportunity has already passed. The result is an entire week without even a minute of practice. Meanwhile, just 5 minutes a day, consistently and regularly, allows the brain to gradually build reflex networks, making your speech naturally flexible. Language is a motor skill. Like muscles, if you don't use it, it weakens. You cannot go to the gym for 5 hours in a single day, then take a month off and expect your body to stay strong. You only need 20-30 minutes of regular exercise each day to build lasting endurance. It is the same with English. Short but consistent speaking practice is the real foundation for fluency. 1 minute of talking in front of a mirror. 2 minutes summarizing your day in English. 3 minutes recording your thoughts on your phone. 5 minutes chatting with a friend or talking to yourself while cooking. Each of these moments is like a small brick. Laid down consistently, they form a solid wall. But if you place a few bricks and then stop, the structure will never be complete. The power of daily habits lies in invisible accumulation. You may not notice progress in a week, but after a few months you realize you speak more smoothly, more confidently, and respond more quickly. That is the reward of consistency. Fluency does not come from a leap forward, but from small steps taken without interruption. The greatest danger in language learning is overexertion followed by quitting. You cram for hours, become stressed and exhausted, and afterward lose the motivation to continue. This approach not only drains you, but also creates negative feelings. Every time you think about studying, it feels heavy. In contrast, a light daily habit of 5 minutes keeps you comfortable, makes it easy to start, and it is precisely this ease of starting that prevents you from giving up. More importantly, short habits help you integrate English into your life rather than treating it as a chore. You don't need to prepare to study. You simply live and let English slip in while driving, washing dishes, or walking. When English becomes a natural part of daily life, you no longer feel like you have to study, but simply that you are living in 2 languages. 1 spoken minute is worth more than 10 silent minutes of thought. Because only when you say words aloud does the brain truly connect thought with the muscles of speech. That process trains reflexes. And with a small habit repeated over time, the brain learns to automate, freeing you from effort when speaking. Set yourself one principle. Don't skip a day. Better to speak 2 sentences in 2 minutes than let the day pass in silence. Missing 1 day may not matter, but missing 2 in a row breaks the chain. Like a body losing its rhythm of exercise, you will find it harder to restart. That is why the core is not duration, but continuity. By maintaining consistency, you also gain another benefit. Your confidence grows day by day. Each day you win a small battle with yourself. Each time you speak, you affirm to your brain that you have the right to use English. This confidence accumulates, and one day you realize you are no longer afraid of entering real conversations. Fluency is like a fire. It does not need one big spark to flare up and burn out, but small sticks added steadily each day. Each minute of speaking is 1 stick. Add a little today, a little tomorrow, and the fire will keep burning, becoming the light that guides your fluency. So stop waiting for perfect conditions. Stop pouring all your energy in once and then abandoning it. Starting today, just 5 minutes a day done consistently is already the right path. That small but steady effort will transform English from a burden into a natural part of your life. And when that happens, fluency will no longer be a distant dream, but the inevitable result of what you do every single day. The biggest obstacle to fluency does not lie in pronunciation or grammar, but in your very thinking. Most learners still think in their native language and then translate into English. This seems reasonable, but in reality, it creates a loop that burdens the brain, slows reaction speed, and erodes confidence. To achieve true fluency, you must change the route. Stop translating and train your brain to think directly in English. The brain always favors familiar pathways. If for many years you have only thought in Vietnamese, every idea will appear in Vietnamese first. When forced to translate, you add an extra layer of processing. This intermediate layer is like a rickety wooden bridge, slow, unstable, and anxiety-inducing. You open your mouth, but your words lag behind your feelings, and that very delay robs you of naturalness. Native speakers never think in grammar rules when they speak. They respond directly to situations, letting language surface like breath. To reach that state, you must reprogram your brain, so each thought can arise in English from the start. This does not happen in a day, but small steps will produce profound change. Begin with everyday activities. When you wake up, instead of thinking Mingzate Trezroy, let your brain whisper, I woke up late. When walking outside, instead of Tre Homnainyo Me Kwa, let the sky is cloudy today appear. That is how you pull your thinking into a new language, not by waiting for big situations, but by starting from small details. Another effective method is to narrate stories in your head. When recalling an event, reconstruct it entirely in English. When imagining tomorrow's plans, script your thoughts in English. Your brain will feel confused at first, but that confusion is a signal that new neural pathways are forming. Just as muscles ache when training, a little brain ache means it is getting stronger. The important thing is not to fear hesitation or clumsy phrasing in your head. You do not need fully formed sentences, you only need ideas to appear in English. If you can't recall a word, temporarily use a simpler one or describe around it. This very patience trains the brain to survive in the language instead of retreating to translation. A tip to break out of translation is to connect words with images, sensations, and experiences rather than their Vietnamese equivalents. When you think of apple, don't tie it to the word tao. Think of the red color, the crisp sweetness, the sound of a bite. In this way, you build a direct link between concept and English rather than via an intermediary. This is how children learn language. They don't translate, they feel. Environment also plays a decisive role. If your phone, computer, and social feeds are all in Vietnamese, your brain will be pulled back to old habits. Switch your settings to English, follow content in English, read news, watch films, and listen to podcasts without relying on Vietnamese subtitles. When the brain is continuously immersed in English as a lived reality, it is compelled to think in that language to save energy. Above all, you must accept a phase of discomfort. Your brain will often go blank when it can't find the right word, but instead of reverting to Vietnamese, allow yourself to fumble in English. That fumbling is the leap. If you always translate back to your mother tongue, you will never leave the comfort zone. True fluency begins with silence in the mind. When an idea pops up in English without translation, you have taken a big step. From there, speech becomes quick, continuous, and natural. You no longer feel you are learning a language, but living in a language. That is a fundamental transformation. Remember, the goal is not to eliminate your mother tongue, but to expand your mind to hold another system of thought. When you can think in both languages, you widen your way of seeing the world. One idea can have two paths of expression, two different shades. That is intellectual wealth that only those who dare to think in a foreign language can have. Bit by bit, situation by situation, you train your brain to stop translating and let English surface directly. This habit is not flashy, does not yield instant results, but quietly reshapes the way you operate with language. And once your brain is accustomed to this flow, fluency becomes obvious, no longer a distant goal. Thinking in English is the true doorway to fluency. Once you step through, you not only speak faster and more confidently, but also feel you are living in a wider world where ideas and language merge. From then on, every sentence you utter is no longer a translation, but your real voice. One of the most harmful habits that keeps language learners from ever becoming fluent is translating every word in their heads. The brain is turned into a translation machine. Vietnamese in, English out. It sounds reasonable, but in reality, it is a forced and exhausting way to learn. Because every time you translate, the speed of communication slows down. Ideas are broken, emotions disappear. You become like a musician who must read the notes instead of playing the melody. Look at how children learn a language and you will see a different truth. They do not translate. When they hear the word apple, they don't think, tao in Vietnamese, but instead directly connect that word to the image of a red apple, the crisp sweetness, the feeling of biting into it with a crunch. Their language is tied to experience, to images, to sensations. This direct connection is what makes language become a natural reflex. The problem with adults is that we are too used to learning from bilingual vocabulary lists. Every English word always comes with a Vietnamese meaning. This method is quick for short-term memorization, but it becomes a long-term trap, because you are teaching your brain that before it can understand English, it must pass through the gateway of Vietnamese. The result is that when speaking, you are always a beat too slow and lose naturalness. To truly be fluent, you must relearn as children do. Throw away the crutch of translation and practice connecting words directly to experience. When you hear the word rain, think immediately of the gray sky, the patter of raindrops on the roof, the smell of damp earth, not the Vietnamese word mua. When you hear friend, let the face of your best friend appear, their familiar laughter, the warmth of companionship, not the word barn bay. Language was never meant to be a conversion chart. It is a map linking emotions and experiences. When you shift your learning in this way, your brain begins to remember faster and react more flexibly. You no longer have to wait for translation before understanding. The feeling of comprehension comes instantly. An effective practice is to learn words in context instead of in isolation. Instead of writing apple equals tau, place the word in a story. I bought an apple at the market. It was sweet and crunchy. You see the market scene, the action of buying, the sweet, crisp taste. Context is the soil where language takes root. You can also take advantage of sight and sound. Label objects around your house in English: mirror, door, window, chair. Each time you look, you don't translate. You just see the word tied directly to the real object. Or when listening to English songs, don't force yourself to translate every line. Feel the rhythm, the singer's emotions, let the words connect with the music rather than a vocabulary list. Another important point: accept the clumsiness at the beginning. Your brain will resist because translation is the familiar path. But if you patiently keep yourself in the state of no translation, your brain will gradually learn to connect directly. It's like giving up the habit of taking a shortcut. At first it feels hard, but once the new path is established, it becomes natural. The biggest fear for learners is not understanding everything. But remember, even native speakers don't always know every single word. They guess meaning from context, from gestures, from emotion. The important thing is not to translate each word perfectly, but to grasp the idea and respond. When you focus on meaning instead of words, you are on the right track toward fluency. Stopping translation not only makes you speak faster, but also changes how you feel about the language. English is no longer a foreign system, but becomes part of lived experience. You begin to feel sunshine as warmth, silence as stillness, freedom as aspiration. These words touch your emotions directly, without the filter of your mother tongue. This is the turning point. You are no longer just learning a language, you are living with it. And when language becomes experience, fluency is no longer distant. It is simply the natural result of letting your brain work as it was meant to, linking meaning with experience, not with translation. See the act of stopping translation as a journey back to childhood, back to the original way humans learn. As a child, you didn't need a dictionary to say your first words. You only needed to feel and imitate. The same is true now. If you dare to let go of the habit of translating, you will open a new world where English is no longer a subject to study, but the natural flow of your everyday life. Fluency does not begin only when your lips produce sound, but is formed even earlier, in the silent space of thought. In those moments when you talk to yourself, plan your day, or whisper emotions that are hard to name, there exists an inner voice. In your native language, that voice flows seamlessly, naturally, without effort. But in English, most learners leave a blank space, or worse, let the inner voice constantly translate back and forth. The absence of an inner voice in English is the very reason you keep hovering outside the door of fluency. Building an inner voice in English is how you bring this language into the core of your thinking. When an idea arises, instead of appearing in your mother tongue and then being translated, it takes shape immediately in English. This not only helps you speak faster, but also gives you the feeling that English truly belongs to you, no longer just a borrowed tool. Imagine, in the morning when you wake up, instead of thinking, Min bun gu kwa, let your mind softly say, I'm still sleepy. When you open the window and sunlight pours in, instead of thinking, Troy homne derp kwa, let the words, what a beautiful morning appear. Each small fragment of thought is a brick building the house of fluency from within. What holds many people back from training their inner voice is the fear of thinking incorrectly. But remember, your inner voice is not for anyone to grade. It is the safest space where you are free to try, to make mistakes, to be clumsy. The more you allow English to exist in your inner world, the easier it will be to let it out loud. Whatever dominates your inner thoughts will be reflected in your outer speech. A simple method is to practice inner narration. Whatever you do, describe it silently in English. I'm making coffee. The water is boiling. I need to check my email. It may sound childish, but this steady repetition trains the brain toward automaticity. From there, you no longer translate. You let English become a natural part of your daily life. In addition to narration, you can build inner dialogues. When torn between two choices, ask and answer yourself in English. Should I go out or stay home? Maybe I'll stay home because it's raining. This kind of dialogue both builds reflexes and expands your vocabulary for real-life situations because you are truly living through them. Another great benefit of the inner voice is its ability to coach your spirit. When you are afraid or discouraged, your inner voice in Vietnamese often drags you down. Mình dơ qua, mình không làm được. But if you train your English inner voice to be encouraging, you will notice the difference. It's okay, keep going. You're learning, not failing. This way of self-dialogue not only strengthens your language, but also rebuilds your belief in yourself. Consistency is essential. Don't expect your inner voice to be fluent after just a week. See it as sowing seeds. At first, your sentences will be short, hesitant, inaccurate, but after a few months, you'll notice you begin to think in longer phrases, with clearer ideas, and sometimes you'll even surprise yourself when a sentence flows out as if you didn't consciously create it. To accelerate progress, let your inner voice span across emotional states. When happy, let your mind say, I feel amazing today. When frustrated, whisper, this is so annoying. When surprised, exclaim, really? I can't believe it. It is emotion tied to words that helps the brain engrave them deeply, exactly how you learned your first language as a child. Think of your inner voice as a personal language coach, always present, never judgmental. You don't need a classroom, you don't need an audience, you only need yourself. And once your inner voice grows strong, you'll witness a miracle. In real conversations, words flow smoother, faster, more confidently, because you have practiced thousands of times in silence. Fluency is not a magic trick that appears when you enter an exam room or when you meet a native speaker for the first time. It is built quietly, in those moments when you walk alone, ride the bus, or lie in bed before sleep. If you let English occupy those moments, you are planting the seeds of a new voice. Your voice in English. One day, you will realize you have just thought an entire paragraph in English without any effort. That is the milestone. You are no longer learning English as a subject. You are living with it. And that inner voice will stay with you forever, as a loyal companion, helping you confidently speak out loud. Building an inner voice is the deepest transformation. It is not loud, not showy, but persistent and powerful. From within, it trains you daily so that when you speak, you are no longer an awkward learner, but someone who speaks English naturally with identity, rhythm, and real emotion. And that is fluency in its truest sense. Many English learners are surprised when they realize they can read text, write well, even speak individual sentences clearly. But when they listen to native speakers in natural conversation, everything becomes a blur. Words vanish, sounds rush together, and the feeling of hearing but not understanding becomes a haunting frustration. The problem is not that you lack intelligence, nor that your vocabulary is too small. The problem is that your ears are not accustomed to real English, the living English full of connected sounds, swallowed syllables, and variations, not the clean, slow version in textbooks. English in real life is like a stream of music, not a row of separate notes. Native speakers connect sounds. Want to becomes wanna, going to becomes gonna. They swallow sounds. Next day sounds like next day. They blend sounds. Did you becomes did ya. For learners used to reading each word slowly, all these phenomena turn into strange noises. The result is that you hear the sounds, but your brain does not recognize them in time. To overcome this barrier, you must train your ears like a musician trains theirs. Listen not just to catch words, but to feel rhythm, to grow familiar with the musicality of the language. Think about when you hear a new song, the first time. It may just sound like vague noise, but after a few listens, your ear catches the melody, then the lyrics, and eventually you can sing along. English works the same way. With repeated exposure to real English, you will gradually find familiarity forming. A common mistake is relying too heavily on translated subtitles. This makes you lazy, preventing your ears from adapting naturally. The right way is to practice active listening. Start with short dialogues at natural speed. Listen once to get the main idea. Then listen again, slow it down. Focus on each phrase. Notice where sounds connect and where they disappear. Repeat this process many times to accustom your ear. The shadowing technique, speaking simultaneously with the speaker, is also a powerful tool. When you mimic not just the words, but also the rhythm, intonation, and linking, your ears and mouth are trained together. Your brain no longer hears only words, but hears the flow, the musicality, the continuity. This is the fastest way to break free from stiffness in both listening and speaking. Choose authentic material, podcasts, vlogs, movies, interview videos, rather than artificial audio from textbooks. Real English is not polished like in a recording studio. It has hesitations, filler words like, laughter and breaths. This messiness is exactly the real environment your ears need to train in. The sooner you immerse yourself, the faster you adapt. One important tip is not to try to understand every word. Even native speakers do not catch 100%. They rely on rhythm, context, and stress to grasp meaning. You must also learn to let go of perfectionism. When listening, focus on the main rhythm of the sentence, the key words. Gradually, your brain will fill in the missing pieces, and you will understand without translating each word. Training your ears is like building physical endurance. It requires consistency, not long sessions. Just 10-15 minutes a day of purposeful listening, paying attention to sound changes, mimicking rhythm, and you will see clear progress after a few weeks. On the other hand, listening for hours as mere background noise will not be effective. A sign of progress is when you start hearing familiar linking patterns. You no longer stumble when someone says, "let me know," instead of "let me know." You no longer get confused when "did you" becomes "did ya." What once baffled you becomes natural. And once your ears adapt, your mouth will also start using these forms unconsciously. Training your listening for real English is not to turn you into a native speaker, but to allow you to live in the flow of the language without losing rhythm. Because communication is live music, not printed sheet music. When your ears can feel the melody, you no longer fear speed, unfamiliar accents, or surprises. You become a participant, not an outsider. When English sounds to you like a familiar song, fluency will arrive more gently. You will no longer translate, no longer guess blindly, but truly listen, truly feel, truly understand. And that is when the language does not just enter your head, but flows straight into your emotions, becoming a natural part of your everyday life. Listening is the key to stepping into the real world of communication. You may speak well, but if you cannot understand, conversations will break down. Many English learners freeze in front of the speed, connected sounds, and diversity of native accents. The problem does not lie in vocabulary, but in the fact that the ears have not been trained properly. To listen like a native, you must train your ears to adapt to the reality of the language, not the polished version in textbooks. The first step is shadowing the technique of echoing speech. This is not just listening and repeating, but reproducing almost simultaneously how natives speak. Intonation, breathing, emphasis, even hesitation. When you shadow, your brain and mouth are forced to synchronize with the sound. Your ears no longer hear isolated words, but hear the melody. And at that moment, you step into the music of English instead of standing outside. Shadowing also frees you from the habit of translating. When echoing, you do not have time to think in your native tongue. You react with your body, with reflexes. This is the fastest way to make language a natural response instead of a logical calculation. At first, it will be hard. You'll run out of breath, miss the rhythm. But don't quit. Each round of shadowing trains your brain to process sound the way a native does. Another crucial factor is accent diversity. English does not have only one standard. Americans, Britons, Australians, Indians, Africans, Caribbeans all have their own pronunciation and rhythm. If you are only familiar with one accent, you will stumble when you encounter another. The real world demands flexibility. A good listener is one who can grasp meaning regardless of where the accent comes from. To train this skill, deliberately expose yourself to many different sources. American podcasts, British films, Australian vlogs, interviews from Indian or Nigerian speakers. At first you will feel confused, but that confusion is your ears expanding. Just like building muscle, you cannot grow stronger lifting only the same light weight. Accent diversity is the heavier weight that pushes your ears to break through. The multi-round listening method is also a sharp strategy. Don't listen once and move on. Break it into layers. Round 1. Listen to the whole thing without a transcript, focusing only on the main idea. Don't stress over every word. Let your brain adapt to rhythm. Round 2. Listen again, this time pausing at each sentence or section, trying to recall and shadow. Round 3. Use the transcript to compare. You will discover the connected, dropped sounds your ears didn't catch. This is where you decode the secrets of real English. Round 4. Listen once more without the transcript to see how much your ears have absorbed. This layered approach is like examining a diamond under different lights. Each round of listening reveals new details, and your ears become sharper. Don't forget to combine passive and active listening. Passive listening is turning on podcasts while driving, cooking, or doing chores. Your brain still absorbs sounds in the background. Active listening is when you sit down, focus, analyze, shadow, and take notes. The two methods support each other. Passive listening lets the language soak in. Active listening sharpens reflexes. When training to listen like a native, abandon the mindset of understanding 100%. Natives themselves do not always hear every word. They rely on context, stress, emotion to catch meaning. Learn to listen for ideas, not words. As long as you capture the main rhythm of the story, you can respond. This is the difference between a learner and a real user of the language. The key is perseverance. Your ears won't change in a week, but after months of shadowing, exposing yourself to diverse accents, listening repeatedly with and without transcripts, you will notice a turning point. Suddenly you hear things that once sounded like noise. Native speech no longer slips away, but stays, connects, and turns into meaning. Listening like a native is not a distant goal. It is the natural result of training with the right methods. Once your ears are attuned to the musicality of the language, you will no longer fear speed, no longer panic at strange accents. You will step into any conversation with confidence, because you know you are not just hearing, you are truly understanding. And this very confidence will free your voice, turning fluency from an idea into a living reality. In communication, long silence is the greatest enemy of confidence. When someone asks you a question, your brain struggles to translate, arrange grammar, and search for vocabulary, while the silence between the two of you grows longer. You become tense, the listener feels awkward, and the rhythm of conversation shatters. This makes many English learners afraid of speaking because they fear they cannot react quickly enough. But there is a simple way to break this vicious cycle. Build an automatic reflex store, short, natural responses that give you a few precious seconds to let your brain organize ideas. Native speakers use this trick all the time. When they don't yet know what to say, they don't stay silent. They have ready-made filler phrases to keep the rhythm. Well, let me think. That's a good question. Actually, I'm not sure about that. These phrases are not meant to deliver information, but to keep the flow, to let the conversation move smoothly. This way, they always create an impression of confidence and ease, even while they are still thinking. You can also train this skill by preparing your own store of reflex phrases. Categorize them by common situations. When you need time to think, let me see, give me a second. I need to think about that for a moment. When you don't fully understand, could you say that again? I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. When you want to lightly agree. I see what you mean. That makes sense. When you want to respond neutrally. Interesting point. That's one way to look at it. These phrases are like planks placed on the river of conversation. When you're not ready to swim to the other side, they keep you afloat, preventing you from sinking into silence. The important thing is to practice until these fillers become reflexes. Don't wait until the situation comes to decide which one to use. Say them out loud every day, repeat them until your mouth produces them automatically without thought. Once you're familiar, you'll find conversations feel lighter because you're no longer afraid of pauses. Another benefit of automatic reflexes is that they create an impression of confidence. When you can maintain the rhythm of conversation, listeners feel you are in control, even when you don't yet have a complete answer. This confidence not only relieves your pressure, but also makes others want to talk with you more, because communication is a continuous exchange, not a test. You can also upgrade your reflex store by recording commonly used phrases from natives in movies, podcasts, or interviews. Choose short, natural expressions that apply in many situations. Write them in a notebook, stick them on your desk, or turn them into flashcards for quick practice. Just 5 minutes a day adds a few more bricks to your reserve stock. The notable thing is that once you have this reflex store, you'll find your brain less tense. Instead of obsessing, I must answer immediately and perfectly, you know you always have a few seconds to breathe, to regain calm. This safety buffer creates space for you to think, arrange words, and eventually answer more clearly. This is also the secret to maintaining a state of flow in conversation. When the flow isn't broken, you feel comfortable, The listener feels natural, and the exchange becomes a true connection rather than a challenge. At that point, fluency is no longer distant. You're living in it by using language as a flexible tool instead of as a grammar exercise. A simple example. Someone asks you a tough question, and you don't yet know the answer. If you stay silent, pressure builds. But if you smile and say, "Well, that's an interesting question. Let me think for a second," you've kept the rhythm and given yourself time. Whatever answer you give next, even if brief, will be well received because you didn't let the conversation die. See automatic reflexes as armor that lets you step out with confidence. They don't make you a perfect speaker, but they make you a smooth one, someone who can keep the flow. And in communication, that is what sets you apart. Fluency is not about making no mistakes, but about knowing how to continue even without a complete sentence. Reflex phrases are the bridge, the stepping stones that maintain flow. Build them daily, train them until they become instinct, and you'll find yourself freer, more confident, and ready to step into any conversation without fearing awkward silence. Many people study English diligently for years, but when they open their mouths, the sound that comes out resembles a text-to-speech machine. The sentences are correct, the pronunciation fairly decent, but the voice is flat, monotonous, lifeless. The listener feels no connection, no emotion. This is the trap of learning a language only as if it were an exam, not as a means of communication. Language is not only for transmitting information, but for allowing people to feel each other. If speech carries no breath, rhythm, or emotion, it becomes soulless. Observe how native speakers converse. They don't pronounce each word like keystrokes. They know how to stretch a word when they want emphasis, lower their voice when serious, pause for a beat to give weight to a message. Behind each sentence is living emotion, excitement, surprise, hesitation, or trust. These nonverbal elements are what make speech human. And that is why you must practice breathing soul into English instead of letting it remain stiff like a string of code. Breath is the first foundation. Beginners often speak as if sprinting, too fast, too urgent, as if afraid of losing rhythm. The result is choppy sentences, hard for the listener to follow. But if you pay attention to breathing, you create necessary space for rhythm. A deep breath before speaking steadies your voice, slows it down, makes it more confident. Let English move with your breath, not against it. Pausing is just as important. A long sentence can cause you to lose rhythm if you try to say it all in one go. Native speakers often break ideas into short beats, each carrying a clear message. For example, instead of rushing through, "I think we should go to the market now because it might rain later," they'll pause naturally. "I think we should go to the market now because it might rain later." This rhythm gives space for the listener to process while adding weight to the message. Emphasis turns speech into music. If every word is equal, the listener doesn't know what matters most. But when you stress the key words, the sentence comes alive. "I really want to go," with really stressed, showing strong emotion. Or, "This is not just a problem, it's an opportunity." Stressing not just and opportunity to convey a shift in meaning. Mastering emphasis makes English a tool of persuasion rather than mere description. Emotion is the soul of language. Don't be afraid to let your voice carry joy, curiosity, doubt, or vulnerability. When you recount a happy memory, let laughter slip into your tone. When you share a hardship, let your rhythm slow, your voice drop lower. These changes not only help the listener understand, but also allow them to feel you. That is true communication. A practical exercise is to read passages aloud, but not like reciting from memory, rather as if telling a story. Add pauses, add emphasis, add emotion. Imagine speaking to a close friend, not to a book. Then record yourself and listen back. If your voice is flat, adjust it. If it lacks emotion, add more. Listening to yourself is the fastest way to escape the robotic style. Also, imitate speakers, actors, or storytellers in English whom you admire. Pay attention to how they breathe, how they pause, how they shift tone to spark emotion. You don't need to copy exactly, but let them inspire you to discover your own rhythm. Most importantly, don't worry about small mistakes. A sentence may have grammatical errors, but if the tone and emotion are right, the listener still understands and often remembers more. Conversely, a structurally perfect sentence delivered soullessly passes through their ears like keyboard clicks. People remember how you made them feel, not whether you used the past perfect or present perfect tense. English only becomes alive when you dare to relax, to let emotion lead. Then you are no longer a machine reproducing language, but a person truly communicating. True fluency is not about vocabulary size, but about making every sentence carry your personal mark, a breath, a pause, an emphasis, an emotion. That is living English, connecting English, your English. Many English learners believe that the ultimate goal of fluency is to speak smoothly enough to impress. But in truth, communication is not a stage for you to prove how skilled you are. It is a bridge connecting two people, a pathway for emotions to touch each other. If you speak only to be admired, your words will carry a tone of performance, lacking sincerity. But if you speak to connect, every word, every intonation will reach the listener's heart. Fluency, therefore, is not just a language skill, but the ability to generate emotion. Listeners do not remember how many advanced words you used or whether your grammar was flawless. They remember how you made them feel. A grammatically incorrect sentence filled with sincerity is often more powerful than a perfectly constructed but cold speech. The power of emotion in speech is most evident in tone of voice. When you speak with joy, your eyes light up, your voice brightens, and listeners are carried along. When you speak with empathy, your voice slows, softens, and they feel understood. It is the blending of emotion and language that creates true magnetism. Native speakers do not speak to impress with every sentence. They tell stories, share, reveal themselves. They let nature lead, let emotions serve as the foundation. What they bring is not perfection, but presence. This is an important lesson for anyone striving for fluency. You do not need to turn yourself into a grand speaker. You only need to be honest when you speak. One way to train emotion in speech is to connect words with personal experiences. When you say, "I'm tired," don't just recite it as a phrase, recall the feeling after a long day. When you say, "I'm excited," bring back a memory of a moment you truly felt thrilled. That emotion will enter your voice, making it more alive than any technique. Also, focus on the other person instead of yourself. The biggest fear when speaking English is, "What will they think of me?" But when you shift your attention to, "What will they feel from me?" the pressure lessens. You stop trying to impress, and you start wanting to connect. This mindset makes you more confident, your voice more natural, and fluency emerges as a byproduct. Think back to your most successful moments of communication in your native language. They didn't come from polished sentences, but from moments when you truly spoke from the heart. English is the same. Only when you allow emotion to enter does it cease being a subject of study and become a bridge of genuine connection. A useful technique is storytelling. Share a memory, a lesson, a dream. Don't focus on grammar, focus on transmitting emotion. Stop fearing mistakes. Let emotion lead. Listeners will remember the story and the feeling they received, not the way you conjugated verbs. Above all, let your fluency serve connection. Don't turn it into a wall of pride to showcase how good you are. Turn it into a door opening to empathy, sharing, closeness. When you dare to speak truthfully, when you dare to reveal yourself through English, that is true power. Fluency was never meant to make you perfect in the eyes of others. It was meant to let you tell your story, express your thoughts, convey your feelings. And when you shift your goal from impression to connection, you will realize one thing: you are free. You no longer worry about mistakes, no longer tense when searching for words. You are truly living inside the language, letting it become a bridge between human beings. The power of emotion in speech is the very soul of fluency. It transforms an ordinary sentence into an unforgettable moment, a short conversation into lasting connection. And only when you see fluency as a tool for genuine connection will you reach the deepest essence of language learning, not to show off knowledge, but to make others feel seen, heard, and accompanied. Fluency is not built in rare study sessions, nor does it emerge from a few hours in a classroom each week. It sprouts from the rhythm of daily life, in the ordinary moments we often overlook. When you stop treating English as a separate subject and start letting it flow into every breath of life, the language truly becomes a part of you. The greatest difference between successful learners and those who remain stuck is this: successful learners don't wait for free time, for a syllabus, or for a class. They seize every situation in their day to practice. They let English become the lens through which they see the world, instead of just a task to complete. In the morning, you can tell yourself, "Time to get up," instead of thinking it in your native tongue. While brushing your teeth, whisper, "I'm brushing my teeth." While making coffee, let the water is boiling appear in your head. These may seem trivial, but each repetition reprograms your brain to think automatically in English. Every familiar action becomes a mini lesson. As you walk outside, instead of letting your mind drift, observe and describe, the traffic is heavy today. That child is smiling. The sky looks cloudy. These short, simple sentences strengthen your inner voice and reflexes. That way, you don't need to wait for study time to encounter English. You live with it all day. Music, movies, and social media can also serve as teachers if you change your approach. Don't just enjoy music for fun. Listen to the lyrics. Hum along. Feel the intonation. Don't only watch films for the story. Notice how characters pause, how they use fillers like, well, actually. Don't scroll social media mindlessly. Follow English-speaking channels so your brain stays immersed. When writing a to-do list, write it in English. When jotting down work notes, phrase them in English. When speaking to yourself in the mirror, practice retelling your day, even if clumsy. Each small action compounds into strength, because language is not mastered through sudden bursts, but through steady absorption. Many people complain they lack an environment or speaking partner. The truth is, your life is already your environment. You can talk to yourself, record your voice, listen back, and adjust. You can send voice notes in English to friends or create a daily voice journal for a few minutes. No grades, no judgment, just you and your growth. Turning life into a classroom means erasing the line between study and living. When you cook, you learn. When you shop, you learn. When you see an English sign, you learn. This mindset makes all the difference. Those who treat learning as a duty soon tire. Those who treat learning as living go far, because there is no boundary. The biggest trap is waiting. Waiting for a new course, for more free time, for a teacher. But language doesn't wait. Each passing day is either a day you let it slip away or a day you let it seep into your habits. That decision lies in every moment you choose. Ask yourself, why do children acquire languages so quickly? Not because they are smarter, but because they live in it 24/7. They listen, imitate, err, and correct all within life's flow. Adults who want fluency must recreate this principle. Make each day an English-saturated environment. You don't need 3 hours each night. You need English scattered everywhere. Your self-talk, your phone, your music, your whispered thoughts. When English fills every corner, you're no longer studying, you're living. And when language becomes part of life, fluency is no longer distant, it is inevitable. Fluency doesn't arrive in exams. It arrives when you stand in front of the mirror and narrate your day in English. It arrives when you play a podcast while driving and suddenly realize you understand. It arrives when you jot a quick reminder in English. It arrives the moment you stop waiting for study time and start learning in daily life. Turning life into your classroom is the only way for English to become habit, instinct, and second nature. Then fluency is no longer something you chase. It is something you live every single moment. In the journey of learning English, the greatest enemy is not complex grammar or limited vocabulary, but the fear of being judged. That fear seeps into every moment you want to speak, choking your voice before it can be heard. You hear a question, you understand it, you have the answer in your head, but your throat tightens. In that instant, you imagine countless scenarios. Others will laugh if you mispronounce. They will be annoyed if you hesitate. They will think you are incompetent if your sentence is incomplete. And you choose silence. But be honest with yourself. How many opportunities have you missed because of silence? How many times have you sat in a meeting, a conversation, an interview, and swallowed back the words that should have been spoken? Did that silence bring you safety, or did it only leave you with regret? The truth is, most people are not observing you that closely. They don't count your grammar mistakes. They don't record every mispronounced word. Often, they even admire you for daring to speak in a language that isn't yours. What they notice is not perfection, but the energy, sincerity, and meaning you convey. The fear of judgment is really an echo from the past, from the classes where teachers marked every mistake in red, from the times you were teased for your unusual accent, from the memory of someone cutting you off and leaving you embarrassed. But the past no longer defines you today. If you keep letting those memories control you, you will never escape the invisible cage. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. Courage is acting even while fear is still present. When you dare to speak English while your voice trembles, when you mispronounce but still smile and continue, in that very moment you are training your mind. I am strong enough not to be controlled by fear. Each time you overcome it, the wall of judgment cracks a little more. Remember, you are not learning English to win praise, but to be present, to tell your story, to express your ideas, to connect with the world. If you remain silent, the world will lose a unique perspective that only you can bring, and you will lose the chance to affirm yourself through your own true voice. One useful way to overcome the fear of judgment is to practice speaking in safe environments first. Start with the mirror, the most patient listener. Practice talking to yourself, record your voice, listen back. You'll realize your English is not as bad as you think. Then share with a friend who understands and respects you. Then gradually expand to new people. Every small step is a victory. Also, train yourself with self-soothing responses. When the voice in your head says, "What if I make a mistake?" Answer immediately, "Then I'll correct it." No one becomes fluent in silence. When you think, "They will laugh at me," remind yourself, "If they laugh, that's their problem, not mine." These reminders may seem small, but they are medicine to calm fear in each moment. The world does not need you to be perfect. The world needs you to show up. A trembling but sincere voice is worth far more than polished silence. People will forget your mistakes, but they will remember the energy you bring. And that energy is the essence of fluency. Fluency that comes from the heart, not just the tongue. Do not trade the chance to connect for the false safety of silence. Each time you dare to speak, you are not just practicing language, you are training courage. Each time you overcome trembling, you are not just speaking English, you are teaching yourself, "I deserve to be heard." Fluency is not a reward for the perfect. It is the result of those who dare to be present, who dare to speak even when afraid. This world does not need more polished but soulless voices. It needs true voices, yours, with all its vibrancy, with its mistakes, and with the courage to stand firm. And when you dare to give the world that voice, fluency will come as a natural reward. Fluency is not the final destination, but the doorway to a new version of yourself, the version that knows how to use language to bring value, to connect with others, to turn ideas into influence. When your English journey began, perhaps you only wished to handle basic communication, to say a few sentences in simple situations. But the further you go, the more you realize fluency is not just a tool. It is part of your identity, a strength that allows you to be fully present in this world. Picture the moment you step into an international conversation. In the past, you stayed silent, listening, smiling, but inwardly regretting the words you didn't say. Now with fluency, your voice rings clear, your eyes are steady, your words are coherent. Others pause to listen to you, they nod, they respond, and you feel your presence carries weight. No longer an observer, you have become a creator of the dialogue. Fluency does not turn you into a copy of a native speaker. It turns you into yourself in another language. You do not need to hide your accent. You do not need to erase your cultural roots. On the contrary, it is that very voice, that very identity, that makes you unique. When you use English to tell stories from your own experiences, you give the world a perspective no one else can. That is value only you can offer. The communicator you once dreamed of is not someone who speaks fast or much or with complexity. That person is you, free, confident, flexible, and vibrant in every word. That person knows how to use breath, tone, and emotion to turn an idea into an experience for the listener. That person doesn't just convey information, but inspires. To reach that image, you must see fluency as a journey of continuous practice. Each day you speak a little, listen a little, write a little, reflect a little. All of it accumulates into strength. You don't become fluent overnight, but you gradually build a linguistic identity, something that defines you whenever you step into any room. When fluency becomes identity, you no longer ask, "Am I good at English?" Instead, you ask, "What value am I giving through English?" At that point, language is no longer a measure of ability, but an instrument for you to play your own melody. The words you speak are not only heard, they are felt. Others don't just see that you speak well, they see that you have something worth sharing, something they want to listen to. The greatest power of fluency is the ability to connect. It breaks borders, erases distance, opens doors to collaboration, friendship, and even career opportunities. A fluent email can lead to an international job. A random conversation in a cafe can turn into a lasting relationship. A heartfelt speech can touch hundreds and change their perspective. And all of it begins with your courage to speak, to use language as a bridge. Remember, fluency is not an ending. It is the means for you to live your truest self in a wider space. It is the ability to share your stories, your experiences, your wisdom, and the beliefs you carry in your heart. When you reach fluency, you are not merely using English, you are living in it, letting it become an extension of who you are. The communicator you once dreamed of is no longer distant. Every day you practice, every time you overcome trembling, every conversation you engage in is a step closer to that image. And one day you will realize you are no longer just a learner, you have become a storyteller, an inspirer, someone who leaves an imprint through every word spoken. This world does not need you to be perfect. This world needs you to be present with your voice, with your identity, with the value you carry. Fluency is the key that opens that door. And when you step through it, you will see something both simple and profound. You have become the communicator you once dreamed of, not because you never make mistakes, but because you speak truthfully, vividly, to connect and to spread value.